coming up.
Okay, then based upon this response, I'm hearing that the employees have to determine whether or not they are referring themselves to the RCMP.
Was it a common practice to pay for work and to pay contractors without that work being completed?
We have requested information of this committee about subcontractors, and in almost every case, we've received no information from departments about subcontracting. That seems to not be being identified or tracked at all. Am I correct in understanding from that there is no oversight around whether or not this requirement is met?
So maybe I'll take
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Can you please give an indication as to the dollar amount then of contracts that were found to be in conflict of interest, please? What was the total amount that was found to be in this unique situation?
Thank you for the question. I do not have the detailed information on hand, so won't be in a position to respond to that question today.
Can you provide a number of the individuals and the corporations, the consultants that were found to be in this conflict of interest situation in addition to the total amount of contracts, please?
I can, sorry if you can bear with me for just a moment, can advise that the information requested covered the periods of 2022 and 2023 with respect to individuals who had articulated a conflict of interest with respect to a contracting relationship. And the information that has been provided, I apologize because I don't see it.
It's fine, Madam Coots.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I do have the answer.
Okay, excellent,
79
thank you.
in 2022, 2023, and 84 in 2023, 2024. Sorry for the delay.
Okay. Sorry, one more time, please. That number was?
79 in the
Okay.
in fiscal year 22, 3, and 84 in fiscal year 23, 24.
Okay, and you don't have the dollar amount of those 79?
I do not.
Okay, thank you so much. Of those 79, how many were referred to the RCMP, please?
I guess with reference to individuals submitting conflict of interest declarations, that's the initiation of a process where an individual is understood to be in a perceived actual or possible future conflict of interest. The process of submitting those applications means that that is then reviewed, and if it is possible to mitigate those conflicts of interest, mitigation measures are put into place.
Can you share with Canadians, please, any wrongdoing that was detected? Basically, what I am discerning from your response is that you found 79 were in this conflict of interest. You cannot confirm the total dollar amount at this moment. Were they all referred to the RCMP? Is this what you're indicating?
No.
Okay.
Just to be clear, what I'd like to underscore is that the completion of a declaration does not signify or suggest any wrongdoing. Rather, it demonstrates that employees have acted in full compliance with rules and requirements in reporting the conflict. On the depositing of a conflict of interest declaration, the evaluation and the review is made as to whether or not the individual is in a real perceived or potential future conflict of interest. Mitigation measures are put into place where and as appropriate. Where mitigation measures cannot be put into place, the employee then has the decision whether or not to proceed with the contract or to step aside.
So to be clear, because it's quite an extensive answer you're giving, but to be clear and simple for Canadians, did you refer them all to the RCMP, or you did not go through an internal process as to determine which ones to refer to the RCMP?
The information that has been provided and reported are the declarations of conflict of interest, which have been deposited and reviewed, where mitigation measures have been indicated and or put into place, and employees have taken a decision whether or not to apply those mitigation measures or to step aside. I wouldn't be able to advise on any reporting that resulted in any investigations by the RCMP.
Okay, then based upon this response, I'm hearing that the employees have to determine whether or not they are referring themselves to the RCMP. We have 79 individuals or corporations that were found to be within conflict. We don't know the dollar amount for Canadians. I would ask, please, Madame Boudreau, if your team could get this number and report it back to the committee. And the information has been reported to public accounts, and we hope that they will share it with government operations. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The government made a commitment to implement a trust and transparency strategy. And recently they released an update in the manager's guide with 4 key updates. And the manager's guide is key considerations when procuring professional service. The first update is that managers should monitor and document the delivery services and ensure that obligations under the contract are met, including by subcontractors prior to issuing of payment. So in plain language, this means that managers should make sure that work is completed before paying. Was it a common practice to pay for work and to pay contractors without that work being completed?
Thank you for the question. So I wouldn't say it was a common practice. Let me just frame, there's the manager's guide, and then last week we announced mandatory procedures. And really this is about getting back to basics and having good hygiene when we do our procurement. And so in procurement, there's the contracting authority. So you hear a lot about procurement officers, but managers who are business owners also have accountabilities and responsibilities. And so what we're trying to do in plain language is make them sure that they're aware. And with the mandatory procedure, we're embedding it now into the approval process. So it's embedded into the structures.
Thank you. I appreciate you framing that for me. I have 5 minutes. And so just a really concise answer is really appreciated going forward. So in plain language, you needed to tell those who were paying contractors that the work actually had to be done before you pay them.
It was putting in plain language what is already required.
Okay, thank you. The second update was that managers should exercise due diligence to maintain the integrity of a procurement, ensuring that obligations under the contract are met, including by subcontractors, prior to issuing payment. Was it common practice before this for managers to not monitor conflicts of interest?
I would say I couldn't answer that question. I don't monitor all contracts, but I would say we wrote it so that people were clear, not that we thought everybody was not doing it. That's really important.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to another part of the strategy that was announced. Your department announced its strategy, which is meant to provide better access to government data and improve trust in federal institutions. In fact, Minister Anand stated on last week on May 29th, and I'll quote, "As we continue to face an unprecedented surge in misinformation and disinformation, our government remains committed to the values of openness and transparency." And yet, there is a shortfall or a reduction in the Integrity Commissioner's budget. What steps have been taken to sort out the $700,000 budget shortfall for that office? And how does reducing that budget align with your limiting the budget of the independent officer that ensures federal institutions following the law?
Thank you for that very important question. If you look at the main estimates, you will see an increase of the budget. There is for sure a gap the amount that you have referred to. I've met with the commissioner. My colleague also met with the commissioner. We're doing everything we can to understand the situation and to move forward. So we have options and solutions. But again, I just want to stress the fact that we see an increase in the main estimates for that budget.
So just to confirm, there's been an even greater shortfall. There's been some increase, but it isn't quite where it needs to be in order for the Integrity Commissioner to do their work.
So just to be clear, the gap that has been highlighted is based on a formula that we are using for all organizations across government. It is a formula that is flexible as well as that it is consistent for all the 90 organizations that are receiving money from Parliament. Don't know, Rod, if you want to add something?
I'm afraid we're past time already.
I assume I can start again, Chair. I want to thank the officials for being here, following up on my questions to the ministers, which related primarily to Indigenous procurement. In plain language, how does the government define an Indigenous business?
So it's a great question. Just in terms of Indigenous procurement programs, there's the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, which is a set-aside program that ISC manages, and they determine eligibility for that program, so they would be best positioned to answer that. For the 5%, to be eligible, they have to be registered on the Indigenous Business Directory or registered on a modern treaty beneficiary business list.
Okay, so there may and likely are businesses that are owned by Indigenous people or businesses that would meet the criteria that are not registered for whatever reason, because they're not aware of it, they haven't been able to fill out the paperwork, whatever the case may be.
It's possible.
Okay. I was looking through some of the documents that this committee has gotten on this issue and was curious to know what percentage of registered Indigenous businesses are located in versus outside of the National Capital Region.
I wouldn't have that answer. That would be ISC that would have that answer because they manage the directory.
Okay. I'd be curious to know that, and then also what percentage of those businesses are actually located in Indigenous communities. I understand you don't have that information, but are you able to get that and share with the committee? We don't have those officials coming before us typically. So.
We'd have to follow up with the ISC.
We will follow up with the organization and try to come back to the committee.
Okay, can that be registered as a request for information, Chair? When we'll get that information one way or the other. The minister talked in her testimony about the subcontracting requirement, and the procurement minister didn't even seem to know this, but your minister did, that the 1/3 requirement that she mentioned, which is that if an Indigenous business receives contracts as part of that set aside, that 1/3 of the subcontracts have to be Indigenous. Presumably, they have to also be on the same list. We have requested information of this committee about subcontractors, and in almost every case, we've received no information from departments about subcontracting. That seems to not be being identified or tracked at all. Am I correct in understanding from that there is no oversight around whether or not this requirement is met?
So maybe I'll take the question. So for PSIB, as you've correctly identified, 33% requirement. So 33% of the total contract value must be done by a business that is either owned or controlled, 51%. In terms of verifying...
So just to clarify, and on the list? Or if they are owned and controlled but not on the list, would they qualify for that 1/3?
So they would have to be, sorry, I'm getting my PSIB stuff out. They would either have to be on the list or listed on a modern treaty business list or directory.
So they would have to meet the criteria for the
Correct.
set aside in order to get the 1/3.
Correct.
Okay.
And then at 51% owned or controlled, and 33% of the total value of the contract must be done by that business. And so in terms of verifying it, it should be part of the terms and conditions of the contract. And then in addition, ISC can do post audits to verify the 33%.
ISC can do post audits. How
Correct.
often do those post audits?
That would be a question for ISC. I can tell you that if the client department can request a post audit of ISC, but in terms of how often or how that's triggered, that's really for ISC.
Okay, since you're here at Treasury Board, how often have you requested a post audit?
Well, I don't manage contracts. So
Okay, well,
turn
not
to the CFO.
the department.
Thank you for the question. Actually, since this policy came into place, TBS has not requested any post audit.
Okay, so we requested subcontracting information. We got almost none. The only way that would be being verified is either keeping track of those subcontracts so others could look at it, or having those post audits done. And we hear that TBS has not requested any post audits. So I think that underlines my concern that this core requirement in relation to the program, ensuring that there's actually business opportunities going to Indigenous peoples, this underlines my core concern that that's not actually being checked in any meaningful way.